My name is Marla Jennings. I'm 43. And 3 months ago, I stood outside a probate courtroom with a folder in my hands, thick, heavy, and full of secrets I never asked for. They weren't just secrets. They were traps, signed and notarized by the very people who were supposed to protect me. My own family. They'd used those papers to declare me legally incompetent. The hallway outside the courtroom was freezing, but my palms were slick with sweat. I hadn't slept in 2 days. My mouth tasted like pennies. And though I'd spent nearly 2 decades as an Army combat medic, trained to stay calm under fire, at that moment, I couldn't remember how to breathe. A clerk walked over and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside wasn't just evidence, it was betrayal, written in my father's own handwriting. I sat down hard on a bench, trying to process what I was holding, when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. The voice on the other end changed everything, but we'll get to that. Stick with me, and if this hits home, if it touches even a corner of your story, leave a comment. I read every single one. It was my niece's birthday party. The air smelled like lemon cupcakes and dollar store hairspray. Pink paper lanterns hung from the oak tree in my sister's backyard, swaying in the breeze while kids ran around squealing like freedom itself. I stood near the patio. Wearing jeans and a soft cotton blouse, holding a juice box someone handed me, as if I still belonged. The scar on my left forearm was quiet that day. Dry, pale. I'd left it uncovered on purpose. Not for attention. Just because it was mine. That's when my mother approached. She smiled sweetly at a passing aunt, then leaned toward me, her voice low and tight. Don't let the kids see those scars, Marla. It's upsetting. The words didn't hit like a slap, they hit like a memory. One that already knew where to sit. I looked at her for a second. Then turned away without replying. Later, when it was time for the family photo, my younger sister, Lynn, grabbed my arm. Cover it up. She hissed. You're ruining the pictures. She smiled brightly for the camera while she said it, like a ventriloquist of cruelty. I didn't argue. I just reached into my purse and pulled out an old napkin. It was brown, stitched by hand in a dusty tent on the edge of a war zone. It once held morphine vials. Now, it would hold my shame, so the rest of them could stay comfortable. The photographer raised his voice. Immediate family, please. They arranged us near a tall ficus. I was placed off to the side, barely in the frame. Holding my father's orthopedic cane so he could stand straighter, I smiled like a ghost who hadn't quite figured out how to haunt yet. Then I heard it. Is that Ghost Falcon? The voice came from across the yard. A man in a slate-gray blazer stood near the cocktail table. His hair was steel, his cane matching. And he was looking directly at me. His voice had that low rumble, like someone who'd shouted over helicopter blades most of his life. Ma'am, he said, may I see the rest of that stitching? I froze. The napkin hadn't fully covered my forearm. Just beneath it, faded but visible, was the outline of a falcon clutching lightning bolts, a unit tattoo. One you don't find in documentaries. The chatter faded. Conversations died mid-sentence. I hesitated, then slowly pulled back the napkin. The man took a breath. The kind of breath you take when a memory comes rushing back too fast to catch. Last week, he said, his voice loud and deliberate, the Ghost Falcon Casualty Extraction Unit was officially declassified. He turned to the crowd. This woman served in the finest evac team the U.S. ever fielded. Someone dropped a glass. It cracked softly on the patio. That's not a scar to hide, he continued. That's a mark earned in fire. Lynn stiffened beside me, horror etched on her face. Mom clutched her necklace like it might save her. Dad just stared blankly ahead, lips still frozen in the photo smile. I didn't move. Not proud. Not ashamed, just still. The man approached slowly. Every step measured. Every step intentional. When he reached me, he extended a hand. His grip was firm. Ceremonial. No show. Just meaning. Kandahar, August 2006, he said. Her team pulled 3 of my men out of a collapsed alley. One of them was my son. The air in the yard shifted. Like the wind had changed direction. I've waited years, he said, turning to the rest of the gathering, to say thank you in public. My throat tightened. I nodded. I didn't know whether to cry or salute. Mission complete, soldier, he added in a quiet voice. The old call and response. Lynn laughed nervously, voice shrill. Well, she said, I guess even black sheep get medals now. Mom chuckled, squeezing Lynn's arm like laughter might undo the damage, but the guests had already changed. A woman stepped forward. She wore a gold crucifix in quiet regret. I didn't know, she said. Neither did I whispered. Not really. I'd lived under silence so long, the truth felt dangerous now. Like sunlight on skin that hadn't seen the light in years. Thank you, I said. I wasn't sure who I was speaking to. The general leaned in. You don't owe them silence, he said. His words landed like shelter. The party stumbled forward in fragments. Polite conversation. Distracted smiles. A child crying in the distance. I stood still. The napkin dangled from my fingers. The scar, uncovered, caught the sunlight, and for the first time, no one asked me to cover it, not a soul. The envelope arrived 2 weeks later. It was thick, cream-colored, and smelled faintly of cologne. My name, Marla D. Jennings, was written on the front in careful script. The ink had smudged slightly, like someone had hesitated while writing it. Inside was an invitation to my father's 75th birthday celebration. The RSVP card had already been filled out. Yes. Attending, not in my handwriting. I stood in the kitchen turning the card over, pressing my thumb into the corner. They didn't want my voice. They wanted a head count. The invite should have meant nothing, not after last Thanksgiving, when Lynn told me I was too intense, too sensitive, too angry about ancient history. I'd promised myself I wouldn't go back just to be a stage prop in someone else's story, but I packed anyway. 3 shirts, a pair of slacks, and the napkin, folded gently and tucked into the side pocket of my purse, not to honor the past, but because I'd learned better than to assume the present would honor me. The drive to Charlottesville took about 90 minutes. The October light was soft, filtering through the maple trees like gold dust. It should have been peaceful. But my hands were locked on the steering wheel like I was behind the dash of a Humvee again, white-knuckled, breathing shallow. Every stoplight gave me a chance to turn around. I didn't take it. When I pulled into the event center's long circular driveway, I saw valets in black vests rushing to open doors for BMWs and Teslas. My old pickup drew a few raised brows. But no one said anything. They never did. That was the family's way. Disapproval wrapped in such thick politeness. It suffocated you. Lynn met me at the entrance. Her dress shimmered, champagne gold, perfectly pressed, the kind of fabric that says, I don't even try, I just look like this. Her smile was tight, her hug all fingertips. You made it, she said, stepping back and eyeing me up and down. You look healthy. I could say the same, I replied. Immediate regret, she gave a short laugh. You brought a wrap, I hope. Photos start in 20 minutes. I nodded. Good to see you too. Inside, the chandeliers sparkled like theater lights. White tablecloths glowed under gold centerpieces. The whole place smelled like money pretending to be humility. Guests wandered around with signature cocktails, chatting about stock portfolios and their kids' second homes. I drifted toward the far corner, trying to fade into the background of my own bloodline. Lynn's husband, Frank, held court near the punch bowl. I heard his voice over the soft jazz playing from the speakers. Yeah, Lynn's sister served somewhere. Overseas? He said, like he wasn't sure if it was the military or just a really intense yoga retreat. Laughter. I turned and headed for the bar. Club soda, I told the bartender. The fizz filled the empty space that Frank's words had left behind. Then the photographer called out, family, please. Someone handed me Dad's orthopedic cane again. No one asked. They just assumed. I took my place next to Lynn, other side, she whispered, gently nudging me. Better light for smooth skin. I moved. Again, eventually, I ended up next to a fake palm tree. Half in the shot. Half out. Just where they liked me, flashbulbs popped, the edge of my scar peeked through my sleeve. Lynn's smile flickered. Marla, she hissed through clenched teeth, please, cover it. You're ruining the photo. A hush spread around us. Subtle, but unmistakable. I didn't rush. This time, I reached into my purse, took out the napkin, and wrapped it carefully, like I was bandaging the past. Not hiding it, just keeping it clean. The photographer nodded. Perfect. Afterward, I wandered toward the buffet table. Not hungry. Just avoiding conversation. Maybe skip Christmas this year, honey. Until you've healed. We just don't know how to explain things right now. I didn't listen past that. The dinner bell chimed. I slipped back into the main room and took a seat at a table marked reserved. It was empty. No one else had sat yet. They were still mingling. Still performing. Lynn walked to the podium, holding a glass of white wine and smiling like a local politician on a re-election tour. To the women who hold this family together, she said. Her eyes locked on mine. Strength comes in many forms. Polite applause followed. I clapped twice, palm to fist. The napkin still covered my forearm. The truth still wrapped in linen. Then came the slideshow, childhood photos, sparklers on the 4th of July, high school dances, barbecues at the lake, one after the other, but something was missing, me. I blinked. Watched closer, photos I remembered being in, gone. Cropped. Edited, one shot in particular stood out. I'd been holding a sparkler, standing between Lynn and Frank. I remembered the breeze that night, the smoke in the air, the laughter. On screen, just them. I watched the sequence unfold, smiling faces that told a clean, curated version of our past, a version where I didn't exist. I sat still, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Not sadness. Not rage, just cold clarity. When the slideshow looped back to the beginning, I slipped out into a hallway lined with framed photos of past events, galas, fundraisers, ribbon cuttings, Lynn, again and again, accepting plaques. Cutting cakes. Always smiling. None of them looked like us, none of them looked like me. I sat on a bench beneath a wall sconce. The light was too warm, too soft for how sharp I felt inside. I touched the napkin on my arm. The thread was smooth, worn with time, the knot was tight. So was my jaw. Footsteps echoed softly, then came a voice, Miss Jennings? It was the general. He stood at the end of the hallway, cane tucked neatly under one arm. May I? He asked. I nodded. He lowered himself beside me with a quiet grunt. I saw it again, his tattoo. Falcon with lightning bolts. Same as mine, 3rd medical extraction. Ghost Falcon unit. Kandahar, your voice, he said slowly, it still echoes in my head. I turned toward him. My godson, he said, was one of the civilians you pulled from that clinic in '06. Evan Carter. He was volunteering when the shelling started. My throat tightened. Did he make it? The general smiled. Not joy. Something heavier. He did. Finished med school. Trauma surgeon now. Baltimore General. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. He wrote to your family, the general continued. Several times. Emails. Letters. Trying to pass along his thanks. He even pushed for accommodations on your behalf. I stared, but I only found out last year, the general said. None of it reached you. I blinked. I thought it got lost. They told me, mail goes missing. Records get shuffled. The general's eyes sharpened. Mail doesn't get lost 3 times. Through 2 chains of command. And a personal letter. He paused. Someone made sure you never saw those words. The hallway fell silent. I don't understand, I said. My voice felt smaller than it should have. They weren't ashamed of your scars, he said. They were ashamed of what they meant. That you'd done something they couldn't control. That you'd earned something they hadn't. The napkin trembled in my lap. So did I. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He reached into his coat and handed me a folded piece of paper. Evan asked me to deliver this if I ever met you. I opened it, handwritten. Short. But every line glowed with gratitude. He remembered everything. The heat, the panic, the way my voice cut through the rubble, the words, "You're not dying here. Not on my watch," he ended with, "I have a family, a life, a purpose, because of you. Thank you for refusing to leave me." I couldn't speak. The general placed a second envelope on the bench beside me. "And this," he said, "is for the fight you didn't ask for, but deserve to win." Inside was the name of a lawyer, a good one. "He's helped vets challenge their records," the general said. "Helped Evan. He knows how to deal with falsified guardianship paperwork." I looked at him, stunned. "Why would you help me?" "Because someone should've," he replied. "A long time ago. And because I don't believe in ghosts." He stood, "Not when the living are still being buried." I folded Evan's letter carefully and placed it in my purse. The knot in my throat didn't loosen, but it settled. Like something inside me had finally stopped pacing. The general offered a hand. "Thank you, General." "Harold," he said with a small smile. "You earned first names a long time ago." He walked back down the hallway, cane tapping against the marble in a slow, even rhythm. I sat there a while longer, staring at the framed photos that lined the walls. Celebrations, achievements, polished smiles. All of them looked like permanence. Like legacy, but I knew better. Legacies can be forged, and some families build theirs by burying others. I stood, smoothed my blouse, and walked back into the main room, just in time to catch the tail end of another toast. Lynn stood at the microphone, her face bathed in the soft shimmer of the chandelier. "Family is everything," she said. "We don't tear each other down. We build each other up." Her voice was velvet. Her eyes were razors. They skimmed the crowd but landed squarely on me. The subtext wasn't even subtle. It never was. I didn't react. Instead, I walked to the small table near the side of the room where I'd left my purse. My hands moved with calm, deliberate intention. I unzipped the side pouch and removed a manila folder. It was yellowed with age, frayed at the corners. I had carried it through 6 different addresses, 1 deployment, and 1,000 almost confrontations. Tonight, it would be seen. I walked slowly toward the stage. Someone whispered. A head turned. Lynn glanced down at me, still mid-sentence. "I just think," she said into the mic, "we should always. There's something I want to share." I said, my voice cutting through her like a clean line on glass. She blinked. "Marla, this really isn't the TI. I won't be long," I said, opening the folder. "Senior year," I began, holding up a page. Lynn submitted an essay to the National Humanities Essay Contest. She won. Full scholarship to Stanford. Feature in the Tribune. A giant cardboard check in the backyard photo. A few people nodded. Some turned to listen more closely. I held up the essay, original print, still bearing a faint coffee ring on the corner. "I wrote this," I said. "It was returned to me by Miss Holloway, our English teacher, with notes. I planned to submit it myself. But the next day, it vanished from my folder." I flipped the page and held it up. "Here's her handwriting. March 5th. 2 weeks before the contest deadline." I read the margin note aloud. "Haunting. Mature. Deeply original. This work reflects the voice of a young woman who has seen too much, and still chooses compassion." I let the words hang there. Lynn's face went pale. "Bloodless, you're seriously bringing up high school?" she said, laughing nervously. "You're pulling out old homework like it's the FBI?" "No," I said. "I'm pulling out truth." Near the back of the room, I saw Aunt Carolyn lean toward her husband. She whispered something. Then someone else stood quietly and walked out. I didn't look at Lynn. I didn't have to. "You have no idea what I've had to work for," she snapped. "You were always the dramatic one. The intense one. I just capitalized." "I never said you didn't work," I replied. "I said you stole." My voice wasn't loud. But it traveled. "You got the spotlight. The recommendations. The scholarship. I got silence. Rejections. And a shrug." Uncle Jim, who rarely spoke at all, muttered from across the room, "I remember that article. Some of the phrases sounded familiar. Thought maybe she quoted you. Lynn turned to Mom. Say something, she demanded. Mom looked stunned. Like she had just realized the room hadn't clapped in a while. It was so long ago, she murmured. Can't you both just let it go? I turned toward her slowly. I did let it go. For years. But I didn't let myself go. And that's the difference. Lynn's voice cracked. You're ruining my life over a college essay? No, I said calmly. I'm standing here because you built your version of life on a story that was never yours. And I lost mine in the process. No gasps, no shouts, the silence did the heavy lifting. I closed the folder and held it to my chest. You erased me once, I said. In photo albums. In family stories. In college applications. I looked out at the crowd, friends, cousins, strangers, but not tonight. Lynn didn't have a comeback, not one that mattered. She turned away, wine glass trembling in her hand. Near the bar, General Harold stood tall, nodding. Like a man who'd watched many battles, and knew exactly when a line had been crossed, I stepped down from the podium, not to applause, but to something better, awareness. People weren't clapping. They were thinking, and that was enough. Just before the cake was cut, I saw Lynn lean toward our mother. Her voice was soft, too soft for most ears. She doesn't know about the second fund, does she? It was a casual whisper, like someone discussing napkin colors, but it landed like a grenade. I didn't react. Not then, but I didn't leave either, that night, when the guests were outside sipping wine and pretending none of it had happened. I walked into the kitchen. Mom was wiping down a counter that was already spotless. Mom, I said. My voice was sharp, quiet. What's the second fund? She turned a little too slowly. Her smile took a second too long to appear. Oh, honey. It was just something your father set up. A backup account. Nothing serious. For what? Emergencies, she said with a shrug. Nothing we ever used. Where is it? She waved a hand. Probably closed. We didn't want to burden you while you were deployed. You had enough to worry about. That wasn't your decision to make. I turned and walked out before she could excuse it into fiction. Down the hallway, past the bathroom, was the office, my father's old sanctuary. The door was still shut, just like I remembered. I opened the sideboard drawer in the hallway, where I used to snoop as a teenager. Behind old checkbooks and expired registrations, I found it, a spare key. The filing cabinet inside the office groaned like a reluctant witness. I flipped through folders until one caught my eye. Jennings Recovery Fund, Trustee, Eleanor Jennings. Inside, I found the truth. The first page was a deposit slip. My VA disability benefits. Monthly. Steady, then came the withdrawals. One to a household account, another labeled education assistance. Armand Rowe, again, tuition, property tax, home down payment. The address, Lynn's, page after page. Year after year, $400 here. $1,200 there. $9,800 for a renovation project. The numbers started to rise in my head like water in a locked room. Then I saw it. Veteran Cemetery, Memorial Reservation. Dual plot. Section R, Row E. I blinked, looked again. The reservation had been made using a copy of my DD 214, my name, my discharge papers. My parents, neither of whom had served a day, had used my record to reserve a burial plot in a cemetery meant for veterans. I made a sound, not a sob. Not a scream, just something raw and honest that cracked the air. They hadn't just erased me, they'd used me, for money. For status. For symbols. They'd cashed in on my scars, and sealed my commendations in a box while they pocketed the benefits. I stood in the middle of my father's old office, folder in hand, the silence pressing in from every side. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper. Something like recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't poor communication, it was theft, deliberate. Cold. And buried under years of staged smiles and empty holiday cards, I walked slowly to the spare bedroom, what used to be mine. The room had been redecorated, painted in a neutral cream. Guest towels. Throw pillows. No trace of childhood, but the closet, top shelf, far back, an old shoebox still sat there. Dented. Dusty. I pulled it down. Inside were pieces of a life they'd tried to bury. Sand-stained letters I had mailed home from Iraq. A crayon drawing of an American flag from a girl we pulled out of a collapsed building in Mosul. A Polaroid of my squad, arms draped around each other, faces covered in dust and sunburn and joy. At the bottom, sealed and yellowing, was a white envelope addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Jennings, return address, Lieutenant Dennis R. Michaels, 82nd Airborne. I opened it. Inside was a commendation letter, my commendation for actions under fire. Signed and mailed by my commanding officer. It thanked my parents for raising someone with courage beyond measure. They never gave it to me, just sealed it in a box, and kept cashing the checks. I sat on the edge of the bed, the folder heavy in my lap. My breath came shallow. The betrayal was no longer emotional, it was institutional. It was financial, it was calculated. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. Picked up my phone. Dialed, Thomas Freeze. The voice on the other end answered, my lawyer. The one General Harold had recommended, the account, I said. I want every transaction traced. And I want an appraisal on the house tonight. He didn't ask why. I hung up and stared at the counter, still wiped clean by my mother, as if she could erase the truth with a dishcloth. But this time, I had the proof. The next morning, my phone buzzed, a text from my cousin Aaron, be careful. Your dad's been asking around. Something about guardianship. I stared at the screen. My blood turned cold. Guardianship. That wasn't a word you threw around lightly. It meant someone thought you were unfit. That you couldn't make decisions for yourself. That you needed management. It meant control. I called Thomas immediately. Check probate court, I said. Search my name under guardianship, not just civil. If he's trying to come through the back door, that's where it'll be. 3 hours later, he called me back, no petition filed. But we found something, he said. It's sitting in draft. Not public. Not active. But definitely real. Show me. He emailed a PDF, petition for guardianship, name, Marla D. Jennings, filed, not yet submitted, attached, statement of mental instability, signed by, Dr. Kenneth Wilcox, dated, 2014. I stared at the screen. Dr. Wilcox had been our family doctor when I was a kid. He'd also been dead for 9 years. My father hadn't fired the shot, but he'd loaded the gun. He'd saved a signed medical statement. Pre-filled. Ready to use the moment I gave them a reason. They didn't need me to fail. They just needed me to slip. I needed proof. So I made a call, blocked number. Casual tone, hey, Jake. It's Frank, Lynn's husband. Just checking in. Jake, my second cousin. The one who always lingered near the corners of family parties, whispering plans like they were stock tips. Yeah, he said casually. Still keeping an eye on her. She's living alone. No boyfriend. No roommate. Makes it easier, right? My stomach turned. Easier for what? I asked, still keeping my tone light. You know, Jake replied. Once guardianship goes through, house gets sold. Everyone's good. Uncle Ron just wants it wrapped up before year end. I pressed stop on the recorder hidden in my purse. I didn't say another word. Just ended the call. Then I texted Jake from my real number, coffee. 1 hour. Riverside Diner. We need to talk. He showed up wearing a fleece vest and an overconfident smirk. I don't want drama, he said, sliding into the booth. You already made it, I said, placing the recorder on the table. And it agrees with me. He froze. Blink. Blink, you thought I'd stay quiet, I continued. You thought trauma meant I'd forget how to protect myself. Marla, come on, I stood. Took the recorder. Left. By the time I arrived at Thomas's office, he was already halfway through the playback. This is conspiracy, he said quietly. Premeditated asset control. based on falsified documentation. We moved quickly, an emergency motion to freeze all guardianship actions, an investigation request into the forged documents, and a motion for protective relief in probate court. That afternoon, I sat across from Monica Reyes, a civil rights attorney and former VA navigator. She scanned the fake document. Raised one brow. "They built a trap," she said. "But they forgot you can read blueprints." Later that evening, I got a call from the Veterans Advocacy Group. They were backing me, witnesses, travel expenses, filing fees, testimonies from my old unit. They were in. I looked out my apartment window. The porch light glowed. No shadows moved. I want it all public, I told Thomas and Monica on our planning call. No settlements. No sealed apologies. "You sure?" Monica asked. "They'll dig into everything. You'll be under scrutiny, too." "I've already been invisible," I said. "Now I want sunlight." We built a case, ledgers, forged letters, VA payment trails, character statements. A week before the hearing, I filed one final motion, open court session, no redactions, no gag orders. That night, my phone rang. "Lynn, you're blowing this way out of proportion," she said, voice sharp and too fast. "You're always so dramatic. Always making everything about your trauma." I didn't argue. I opened my phone gallery, took a screenshot of the draft guardianship letter, texted it to her, caption, "Nice try. See you in court." She didn't call back. The air in my apartment felt different after that, not lighter, just sharper, like the quiet before a storm. I was finally ready to meet it, face to face. I printed out every document, color-coded the tabs, labeled the transactions, bound the pages into a thick black binder, one that made a satisfying sound when it hit a table. Thomas scheduled the hearing 2 weeks out, enough time to gather witnesses, not enough for them to invent new excuses. Outside, the air had turned colder. I didn't notice. Inside, I felt clear. This wasn't about grief anymore. It was about justice, delivered line by line, ledger by ledger, and this time, no one was going to erase me. The courthouse smelled like old linoleum and legal dust, familiar and heavy, like justice had a scent and it aged slowly. By 8 a.m., the courtroom was packed. I took my seat at the petitioner's table, binder in front of me, hands steady. Across the aisle sat Lynn, scrolling through her phone like she was bored in a dentist's waiting room. My father was beside her, wearing the same navy blazer he used for funerals and fundraisers. He didn't look at me. The gallery was a strange blend of the expected and the impossible. 3 older veterans sat in the back row, their unit caps frayed at the edges but worn like medals. A few neighbors. A woman from our church who once brought tuna casserole when Mom had hip surgery. I even spotted a reporter from Channel 6, scribbling into a small notebook. These people weren't here out of curiosity. They were here for the silence, to see what happened when someone finally spoke. At 9:02 sharp, the judge entered, gray hair, direct gaze. No nonsense, but the hem of her robe, just above the shoe, revealed a stripe of desert tan, service ribbons. I didn't miss it. She sat, straightened her papers, and spoke with calm authority. Docket 2063. Jennings versus Jennings. Allegations of financial exploitation, attempted fraudulent guardianship filing, and a motion for protective relief. Counsel, proceed. Thomas stood. "Your Honor," he said. "My client, Marla D. Jennings, is a decorated combat medic. Her family members, the respondents, engaged in a sustained, coordinated effort to siphon her VA disability benefits, conceal military commendations, and attempt to declare her legally incompetent using forged documentation. We are seeking restitution, protective orders, and formal investigation into potential criminal misconduct." He opened the binder, each tab, a year, each document, a receipt, bank transfers, handwriting samples, a notarized doctor's letter dated 5 years after the physician's death. Thomas paused for a moment, then pressed play on the recording. Jake's voice filled the courtroom. "She's still living alone. No roommate. Makes it easier, right? Once guardianship goes through, house gets sold. Everyone's good." Lynn rolled her eyes. Dad whispered something to her. The judge raised a single brow. Miss Jennings, she said, nodding at Lynn, would you like to respond? Lynn stood, smoothing her blazer, projecting calm like a PR specialist at a bad press conference. Your Honor, she began, my sister has always had emotional difficulties. She's unstable. She exaggerates. This is personal history twisted into courtroom drama. Dad added, we were trying to help her. We thought she needed support. Thomas didn't flinch. By forging documents? He asked. By draining her VA account into tuition payments and home renovations? The judge looked unimpressed. Call your next witness, she said. A chair scraped in the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. Sergeant Major Samuel Ford stepped into the aisle, uniform sharp, shoulders square, medals glinting beneath the fluorescence. He took the oath, sat down, and adjusted the mic. Sergeant Major Ford, Thomas began. In what capacity did you serve with Miss Jennings? He smiled faintly. I led 3rd Squad, Ghost Falcon Unit. Marla was our senior medic during the 2006 Kandahar deployment. What can you tell the court about her competence? He didn't hesitate. She patched 3 men while a wall collapsed from incoming fire. Pulled another out of a burning Humvee using one arm, her other had been hit. Then she rerouted our entire evac plan while half-conscious from blood loss. A few murmurs rippled through the room. She didn't just keep us alive, he said. She kept us together. He reached into a folder. I'd like to read a field report entry from August 9, 2006. The judge nodded. Medic Jennings displayed exceptional field judgment, surpassing that of senior officers on site. Evacuation was coordinated under maximum threat with minimal delay. Morale and survival were directly improved due to her presence. Silence followed. Even the court clerk stopped typing. In your opinion, Thomas asked, is Miss Jennings capable of managing her legal and personal affairs? Ford chuckled softly. She ran a battlefield triage center out of the back of a Humvee. She could manage this courthouse blindfolded. The judge cracked a near smile. Thomas nodded. Thank you, Sergeant Major. I turned slowly, watching my father's face. Red spots bloomed on his cheeks. Lynn no longer looked at her phone. Miss Jennings, the judge said, do you wish to make a statement? I stood, not shaky. Not nervous, just ready. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone, I said. I came here because silence is where betrayal grows. I looked around the room. I served my country. I came home with wounds, but also with skills, empathy, and strength. My family saw weakness. They saw an opportunity. I paused. They used my name. My records. My silence. They erased me from photo albums, from family stories, from school awards. But they didn't erase the truth. I opened the folder and held up Evan's letter. They couldn't. Saturday, the judge flipped through her notes, then looked up. This court finds sufficient evidence of financial exploitation and attempted fraud. Effective immediately, all trust assets are frozen. A protective order is issued against any future guardianship filings. And this matter is referred for criminal review. No one clapped, no one needed to. The truth had weight, and now it had a voice. As I stood to leave, Sergeant Major Ford rose from the gallery and saluted, right there, in open court. My throat burned, but I held it together. For the first time in years, I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't need to. I was finally walking forward. The house was quieter than I remembered. It was empty now, staged for sale, dressed in throw pillows and beige rugs like it was auditioning for a real estate magazine. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, like someone had tried too hard to erase history. I moved through each room slowly. Not grieving. Not reliving. Just observing. The kitchen still had the same calendar pinned to the fridge, stuck in a month from 2 years ago. My old bedroom had been transformed into a guest room. No posters, no books, just a folded comforter on a bed that had never known me. But the floorboards still creaked near the window, exactly where I used to press my face against the glass and dream of anywhere else. In the living room, above the cold fireplace, I placed a single frame on the mantel. Inside was the commendation letter from Kandahar. The real one, signed. Dated. Mine. It wasn't a monument for them, it was a marker for me, proof that I had survived more than just a war. Outside, the trees rattled softly in the fall wind. I left the house key on the granite counter, closed the door behind me, didn't look back. Some endings don't need witnesses. 2 weeks later, I sat in a small office at the downtown VA center, walking a younger vet through the benefits appeal process. He had burned scars down one side of his neck and a stammer that got worse when people interrupted him. They said I missed the filing window, he muttered, eyes on the floor. I slid a form across the desk. You didn't, I said. They lost it. We're filing again. And I'll call the regional officer myself. He looked up. Why are you helping me? I smiled, because someone once helped me. And someone else didn't. I remember the difference. My phone buzzed, an email. Another inquiry from a nonprofit. They were building a resource guide for women veterans facing family-related disputes after discharge. They'd heard what happened in court. Word had spread, not viral, not explosive, but in ripples. A newsletter here. A shared PDF there. Sometimes I'd get voicemails from people I'd never met. One was from a mother in Oregon. My daughter came back from Afghanistan and now she's fighting for custody. For housing. For dignity. She heard what you said in court. She said it made her feel like maybe she's not crazy. There are victories that don't show up in court rulings or headlines. They live in the quiet shift of someone deciding not to give up. One morning, I drove past the vet center and saw a new banner hanging above the door, dark blue. Simple white letters, "You are not forgotten." I parked. Just stared at it for a minute longer than I needed to. This time, I believed it. Inside, someone noticed the brown cloth I had wrapped around my water bottle. They pointed. Is that military? I nodded. Unwrapped it slowly. It's from a friend, I said. He didn't make it home. He stitched it during a moment of peace. In a place built for chaos. They looked at me. Is it a symbol? Not of pain, I replied. It's a reminder. I ran a finger along the edge, that I lived through something real. And that I still get to choose how the story ends. The scar beneath it had faded, the skin was uneven, but no longer raw. Sometimes people still stared, most didn't. Once in a while, someone would glance at it and say, quietly, respect. And that was enough. I never got a call from Lynn, not a letter, not a voicemail. Mom sent a birthday card once, unsigned, no return address. I threw it away unopened. Dad's lawyer tried to negotiate a closed settlement. I declined. The protective order stood. The criminal investigation moved slowly, but it moved, and in time. The truth moved with it. I stopped dreaming about courtrooms and slide projectors. Instead, I dreamed of the alley in Kandahar. Only now, when the smoke cleared, everyone made it out. I woke to the sound of morning birds, not shellfire, and I breathed without guilt. The world didn't suddenly turn kind, but it turned honest. And in that honesty, I found something better than applause. I found clarity. I found purpose. I found myself, not lost, not broken, just waiting, to be claimed again. And when I looked in the mirror, the scar no longer stared back like an accusation. It looked like a signature, and this time, it was mine. If you've ever felt like someone tried to erase your story. Like your truth was too inconvenient for the people who should have loved you most. Remember this, being erased doesn't mean you stop existing. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means someone was afraid of your strength, afraid of your scars. Afraid of your voice. Marla's story isn't just about betrayal, it's about reclamation. She didn't speak up for revenge. She spoke up because silence had taken enough. Because scars are not shameful. Because you can be hurt and still be whole. Because you can be cut from the frame, and still hold the heart of the picture. To every veteran out there struggling to be seen. To every person who's been called too much, too intense, too angry, you are not forgotten. Leave a comment below. Tell us, what would you have said to Marla if you were sitting in that courtroom? We read every single one. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more true life stories of healing, justice, and strength. Your support helps share voices that were never meant to be silenced. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you to those who keep going, even when no one claps. Even when the camera looks the other way. This has been a story from Revenge Served Cold. We'll see you next time.